Fire her now, and throw that blind beggar out before the donors see him. Grant Pierce shouted the orders so loudly that the music inside Whitmore Grand Hotel seemed to stop breathing. Keisha Monroe froze with a bowl of soup still shaking in her hands. A second later, Grant slapped the bowl down. Hot soup splashed across the polished marble and stained her worn black shoes. Phones rose around her. Rich guests turned from the gala doors. Keisha pressed one hand over the small medicine box in her uniform pocket, the pills she had not yet paid for, the pills her little sister Nia needed before morning dialysis. Then the blind beggar reached toward the metal tag on Keisha's keychain. His fingers touched the old silver card marked WGH-001, and his face changed. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. Keisha could not answer. Grant stepped between them like a wall. "Do not speak to her," he snapped. "She is no longer staff." The blind man sat near the service entrance with a white cane across his knees and rainwater dripping from his sleeves. He looked poor. He looked forgotten. His coat was torn at the cuff. His shoes were cracked at the sole. To the guests walking past him in diamonds and black suits, he was only a stain at the back door of a five-star hotel. But to Keisha, he was a hungry man who had asked for water in a voice that sounded too tired to beg. She had not taken food from the hotel kitchen. She had given him her own staff meal. One paper bowl of soup, one piece of bread wrapped in a napkin, the only thing she had eaten since sunrise. Grant pointed at the soup on the floor. "This is theft." Keisha shook her head. "Sir, it was my meal. Your meal belongs to this hotel until I say otherwise." His voice cut across the service corridor. "You think kindness makes you special?" Marissa Vale, the gala director, stood behind him with a headset and a clipboard, her lips tight with disgust. "The donors are entering in 3 minutes," she said. "Get this cleaned up before someone important sees it." "Someone important?" Keisha looked at the blind man on the cold stone step. His hands were dark, steady, and scarred across the knuckles. His head was lowered, but he was listening to every word. "Please," Keisha said, keeping her voice low. "My sister is sick. I need this shift. I will clean it. I will pay for the soup. Just to not take my job tonight." Grant laughed once. Not loud. That made it worse. "Your sister is not my problem." The words landed harder than the bowl hitting the floor. A woman in a silver gown whispered, "Why do they always bring their problems to work?" Another guest lifted his phone higher. The red recording light blinked in Keisha's face. She wanted to hide. She wanted to cry. But she stood still. Her mother had taught her never to bow her head when she had done nothing wrong. Grant reached for her name badge. Keisha Monroe, he read, as if her name were dirt. Room service assistant. Temporary. Replaceable. He ripped the badge from her shirt. The pin scratched the fabric. Keisha flinched, but did not step back. "I fed a hungry man," she said. "That is all." "No," Grant said. "You embarrassed this hotel." He turned to the security guard. "Escort her out with him." The guard hesitated. For one small second, his eyes moved from Keisha's shaking hands to the medicine box pressing against her pocket. He had seen her work double shifts. He had seen her eat standing up. He had seen her send every paycheck home. That second gave Keisha hope. Tiny hope. Thin hope. Then Marissa snapped her fingers. "Do your job." The guard lowered his eyes and moved toward Keisha. The blind man lifted his head. "Let her speak." His voice was quiet, but it carried. Not weak. Not begging. The corridor went silent again. Grant turned slowly. "Old man, you are lucky I do not have you arrested for trespassing." The blind man kept his hand near Keisha's keychain, near the silver card. "That tag," he said. "Who gave it to you?" Keisha looked down. The WGH-001 card swung from her keys, scratched and dull under the chandelier light spilling from the gala hall. "It was my mother's," she whispered. "She worked here before I was born." Grant's face changed for half a breath. Fussed, almost hidden, but the blind beggar heard the silence. He heard Grant stop breathing. He heard the lie before it was spoken. Grant snatched the keys from Keisha's hand. "Stolen property," he said quickly. "Add it to her report." Keisha reached for them. "No, please. That is all I have from her." "Then you should have guarded it better." Grant shoved the keys into his pocket and nodded to security. "Take them both out. Now." The guard gripped Keisha's arm. The guests stared. The phones recorded. The soup cooled on the marble like a dirty stain. Keisha looked once at the blind man, ashamed that helping him had cost her the only job between Nia and another night of pain. But the man was no longer looking lost. His fingers tightened around his white cane. His face turned toward Grant's pocket, where the WGH-001 card had disappeared. As Keisha was pulled toward the back door, the blind man tapped his cane 3 times against the marble. "Top! Top! Top!" Then he said one sentence that made Grant Pierce go pale. "Before you throw her away, tell me why you were so afraid of a promise your hotel buried." Grant Pierce went pale, but only for a second. Then he smiled like a man who had practiced lying in mirrors. "A promise?" he said. "Listen to him. The old beggar thinks hotels make promises to people like you." A few guests laughed softly. Keisha was still being held by the security guard, her arm caught between shame and pain. The service corridor stood between 2 worlds. On one side, the gala doors opened to golden light, crystal glasses, white tablecloths, and donors wearing watches worth more than Keisha made in a year. On the other side, there was spilled soup, wet footprints, a blind man on the floor, and a young woman with a torn uniform and no name badge. Grant pulled Keisha's keys from his pocket and held up the old metal tag like it was dirty. "This is not a holy object," he said. "It is hotel property." Keisha took one step forward. "Please get it back. It was my mother's." Marissa moved between them with her clipboard pressed to her chest. "Your mother is not on tonight's guest list." The words cut deep. Keisha swallowed them, because crying would make the phones record closer. The blind man turned his face toward Marissa. "What was her mother's name?" Grant answered too fast. "Irrelevant." That one word made the blind man go still. Not scared. Still. The kind of stillness that made the air feel watched. Keisha noticed it, but she did not understand it. She only understood that her last shift had vanished, her sister's medicine was still unpaid, and the small silver car that had survived her mother's death was now in the hand of the man trying to erase her. Grant waved the security guard forward. "Take her to the staff room. She will sign the violation form, collect half-day pay, and leave through the loading dock." Keisha's heart jumped at half-day pay. It was not enough for everything, but it was enough for a part of Nia's medicine. Enough to keep the clinic from turning her away in the morning. That was how poor people got trapped. Not by big choices, by small ones that broke them slowly. The guard led her past the gala entrance. The ballroom doors opened wider. A string quartet played. A woman laughed beside a tower of champagne. A banner above the stage read, "Vision without walls." Charity for the blind. Compassion for all. Keisha looked back at Calvin sitting near the step, rain on his shoulders, while donors lifted glasses under that beautiful lie. "Keep walking," Marissa said. In the staff room, the light was harsh and white. No chandeliers there. No flowers. No music. Just lockers with broken handles, a sink with a slow leak, and a small table where workers ate fast before being called back to serve people who never learned their names. Grant placed a paper in front of Keisha. "Sign." The form was already printed. Her name was already typed. The accusation was already chosen. Misuse of hotel property. Endangering guest experience. Unauthorized contact with street individuals. Keisha stared at the line for her signature. "This says I stole." "It says you made a mistake," Grant said. Poor girl survived by admitting mistakes quickly. Keisha's fingers curled around the medicine box in her pocket. She could feel the cheap cardboard bending. Nia's last dose was inside. Her next one was not. Her phone buzzed once. A message lit the cracked screen. "Keisha, did you get paid yet?" The clinic called again. It was from Nia. Keisha closed her eyes. Grant saw the message and leaned closer. "Sign, and you walk out with something. Refuse, and I make sure no hotel in Atlanta hires you again." For one breath, the pen touched her fingers. For one breath, hunger, fear, rent, medicine, and shame all pulled at her hand. If you're listening to this, and you have ever had to choose between telling the truth and feeding someone you love, tell me who you believe right now, Keisha or the man holding the paper. Because in that room, the truth had no suit, no title, and no microphone. It only had a young woman trying not to break. Then a voice came from the doorway. "Do not sign what you did not do." Everyone turned. Calvin stood there with his white cane in one hand, guided by no one. The security guard behind him looked confused, as if he had tried to stop the old man and somehow failed. Grant stepped forward. "How did you get in here?" Calvin did not answer him. He tilted his head toward Keisha. "What was your mother's name?" Keisha's throat tightened. "Lillian Monroe." The room went silent. A pipe dripped once into the sink. Calvin's hand tightened around his cane. Grant reached for the paper. Enough. But Keisha saw it this time. The fear. Not anger. Fear. Calvin whispered the name, as if it had been buried under the hotel floor for years. Lillian. Then he turned toward Grant and asked, "Why is her daughter being forced to sign the same lie?" Calvin's question hung in the staff room like smoke. Why is her daughter being forced to sign the same lie? Keisha looked from the blind man to Grant, waiting for someone to explain why her mother's name had changed the air. Grant did not explain. He snatched the violation form from the table and folded it hard. "This conversation is over." Keisha stepped forward. "What same lie?" Grant pointed at the door. "You want your half-day pay, Miss Monroe? Then leave quietly." Calvin turned his head. "She asked you a question, and I gave an order," Grant said. His voice was calm now, which made it colder. "She is dismissed." Keisha wanted to fight. She wanted to grab the WGH001 tag from Grant's pocket. She wanted to ask why a blind stranger knew her mother's name like a wound. But her phone buzzed again, and Nia's message filled the cracked screen. "Keisha, the nurse said they cannot wait past morning." Keisha's throat closed. That was the real punishment. Not the guests. Not the phones. Not the soup on her shoes. It was the little girl across town, waiting for medicine her sister could no longer buy. So Keisha took the envelope Grant pushed toward her. "Half-day pay. Thin. Humiliating. Not enough. You are not generous," she whispered. "You are just cruel in smaller bills." Grant leaned close. "Cruel people survive. Kind people get fired." Calvin heard every word, but he did not stop her from leaving. He only stood very still, one hand on his cane, as if he was holding back something heavy. Keisha walked out through the loading dock, not the front door. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still wet. Her old shoes made soft sounds against the concrete. Behind her, the gala music rose again, bright and careless, as if nothing had happened. Ahead of her, the bus stop light flickered. She opened the envelope under that weak light. $46. She laughed once, but it broke into a sob before it became sound. $46 for dignity. $46 for silence. $46 after 6 months of double shifts, missed meals, swollen feet, and smiling at guests who never looked at her face. By the time Keisha reached the small apartment she shared with Nia, the hallway smelled like boiled rice and old carpet. A red notice was taped to their door. Final warning. Rent overdue. Keisha pulled it down before Nia could see. Inside, Nia was sitting on the edge of the sofa bed with a blanket around her shoulders. She was 14, but sickness had made her look younger. Her dialysis bracelet hung loose on her thin wrist. "You were late," Nia said softly. "Did Mr. Grant keep you again?" Keisha forced a smile. "Something like that." Nia saw the soup stain on her shoes. Then the scratch on her uniform where the name badge had been ripped away. Her smile faded. "He fired you." Keisha looked away. "I'm going to fix it. You always say that when you are scared." The words were not cruel. They were tired. Keisha knelt in front of her and took out the medicine box. 1 dose left. 1 small bottle. 1 morning between hope and danger. Nia touched Keisha's empty keychain. "Where's Grandma Lillian's silver card?" Keisha froze. Grant took it. Nia sat up straighter, fear sharpening her face. "But Grandma said never lose it. She said it proved the hotel used to have a heart." Keisha stared at her. "What did you say?" Nia reached under the sofa cushion and pulled out a folded napkin, old and soft from being opened too many times. On it, in faded blue ink, was their mother's handwriting. The old staff meal promise was real. WGH001 was not charity. It was a debt. Keisha read the words twice. Her hands began to shake. Across the city, inside a black car parked behind Whitmore Grand Hotel, Calvin held a small phone to his ear. "Darius," he said quietly, "search every archive under Lillian Monroe, WGH001, and staff meal promise. His assistant typed fast. A long pause followed. Then Darius spoke in a lower voice. Sir, the file exists, but someone locked it 20 years ago. Calvin's jaw tightened. Who signed the lock? Another pause. Then the answer came. Grant Pierce. Grant Pierce signed the lock, Darius said through the phone. Calvin did not move inside the black car. Outside the tinted window, Whitmore Grand Hotel glowed like a palace built over a wound. The gala lights were still bright. The donors were still laughing. But Calvin's face had gone quiet in a way that made Darius stop typing for a second. Say it again, Calvin said. The file was locked 20 years ago, Darius answered. Authorized by Grant Pierce. Same employee name. Lillian Monroe. Same internal code. WGH-001. Calvin lowered his head. His white cane rested across his knees, still wet from the rain. Open the archive. I cannot open it from here. Someone sealed the old personnel folder under executive restriction. Then check the backup kitchen records. Darius typed again. Keisha was across town, sitting beside Nia on the sofa bed, holding the faded napkin like it might turn to dust. The words from their mother looked simple, but they hurt like truth. The old staff meal promise was real. WGH-001 was not charity. It was a debt. Nia watched her sister's face. Why would Mr. Grant take it if it meant nothing? Keisha had no answer. She only saw Grant's hand snatching the silver card away. She saw his face change when Lillian's name was spoken. She saw the blind beggar go still, like he had heard a ghost. Maybe it is just an old tag, Keisha whispered. No, Nia said. Her voice was weak, but certain. Grandma Lillian told me rich people hide what shames them. Poor people keep what proves they existed. Keisha looked at her little sister. For a moment, the tiny apartment felt quieter than the hotel. Then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Keisha did not answer. Across the city, Darius leaned closer to his laptop. Sir, he said slowly, there's a kitchen camera entry from the night Lillian Monroe was fired. Calvin's fingers tightened around the cane. Play it. I only have a log. Not the video. Why? 11 minutes are missing. Calvin turned his face toward the hotel. The same silence from the staff room returned. The same shape. The same lie. And tonight, he asked. Darius typed faster. Tonight's service corridor camera also has an 11-minute gap. Calvin closed his eyes behind the dark glasses. That is not a mistake. No, sir. Darius paused. There is more. The old WGH-001 program was not just a meal policy. It was funded by a private family endowment. It was supposed to feed staff in crisis and anyone turned away hungry at the service door. Who moved the money? The recent records show the fund was folded into gala branding 3 years ago. Calvin's mouth hardened. Grant. His signature is on the transfer. For the first time that night, a small piece of hope entered the darkness. Not enough to free Keisha. Not enough to punish anyone. But enough to prove the floor beneath Grant was cracking. Calvin gave one order. Find anyone who lived near Lillian Monroe when she was fired. At the hotel, Grant's private office was hidden behind a wall of framed awards. Hospitality Leader of the Year. Community Vision Award. Human Heart in Service. He stood in front of them, while Marissa held Keisha's keys in a plastic envelope. The WGH-001 card sat inside, dull and old, but Grant looked at it as if it could burn him. Why does the blind man care about this? Marissa asked. He does not, Grant said too quickly. Old people invent stories. Then why are your hands shaking? Grant turned on her. Watch your tone. His desk phone blinked with a security alert. Archive access attempted. WGH-001. Lillian Monroe. Grant stared at the screen. The blood left his face. Marissa saw it. This time, he did not bother hiding it. Who is looking? She whispered. Grant grabbed the phone and called the security room. Lock the staff archive. Pull tonight's service footage. All of it. The guard on the other end said something that made Grant's jaw tighten. What do you mean backup access? He snapped. At that same moment, Darius found a name buried in an old tenant note linked to Lillian Monroe. Mrs. Bell, former laundry helper. Still alive. Last known address, the same apartment building as Keisha Monroe. Calvin lifted his head. Go to her. But before Darius could answer, Grant gave another order into the phone, low and dangerous. Find Keisha Monroe before anyone else does. And if she still has anything from her mother, take it. Grant's order reached Keisha before help did. The knock came hard enough to shake the thin apartment door. Nia flinched on the sofa bed, and Keisha folded the old napkin so fast her fingers nearly tore it. "Who is it?" she called. "Hotel security," a man's voice answered. "Open the door, Miss Monroe." Keisha's stomach dropped. She had left Whitmore Grand through the loading dock with $46 and a broken name badge. Now the hotel had followed her home. She slipped the napkin inside Nia's medicine box and opened the door only a few inches. Marissa Vale stood in the hallway with 2 security guards behind her and a sealed envelope in her hand. Her gala dress was gone. Her smile was not. "You forgot to return stolen property," Marissa said. Keisha kept one hand on the door. "Mr. Grant took my keys." "Not the keys." Marissa looked past her into the apartment. One room, one cracked lamp, one sofa bed, one sick child trying to sit up with a blanket around her shoulders. "Anything connected to your mother?" Nia whispered Keisha. That tiny voice was enough to make the neighbor across the hall open her door. Then another door opened. Then another. Poor buildings had thin walls. Shema traveled fast. Marissa knew it. She lifted the envelope so everyone could see. "Whitmore Grand Hotel is offering you one last chance to avoid charges. Sign this statement. Admit you removed hotel property. Return all items. Stay away from the hotel and its guests." Keisha stared at the paper. "You came to my home for a napkin?" One guard stepped forward. "For evidence." "Evidence of what?" Keisha asked. Marissa leaned closer. "Of a girl who lost her job and decided to make up a story about her dead mother." The hallway went quiet. Nia started to cry without sound. Keisha felt something hot rise in her chest, but she held it down. Not here. Not in front of Nia. Not in front of neighbors who already knew what hunger looked like. "My mother was not a lie," Keisha said. "Then prove it." Marissa's eyes moved to the medicine box on the table. Keisha saw it and moved first. She stepped between Marissa and Nia. "Do not touch that." "So that is where you hid it." Marissa nodded to the guard. "Check the box." Keisha held the door wider and stood in the frame. Her hand shook, but her voice did not. "You can call me poor. You can call me fired. You will not put your hands on my sister's medicine." For 1 second, the older neighbor, Mrs. Bell, stepped into the hall. "That girl works harder than anyone in this building," she said. "She is no thief." Marissa turned to her with a cold smile. "Ma'am, this is a legal matter." Those words shut the hallway down. Legal. Charges. Hotel. Security. Poor people knew when words were bigger than they were. Mrs. Bell lowered her eyes. The tiny hope died there. Marissa used the silence like a weapon. "Sign, Keisha, or your sister watches you get taken away over trash your mother should have left buried." Keisha looked at Nia. The girl was gripping the medicine box now, both arms wrapped around it like it was a baby. Keisha wanted to scream. Instead, she reached for the envelope. "I will read it first." Marissa laughed. "You do not read your way out of consequences." A phone buzzed in Marissa's hand. She glanced at the screen, and her face tightened. Grant's name was there. She answered in a whisper, but Keisha heard enough. "No, she has not handed it over yet." A pause. "Yes, the child has the box." Another pause. "I understand." Marissa ended the call and looked at Keisha differently now. Not annoyed, afraid. That fear told Keisha the napkin mattered more than the hotel wanted to admit. Across town, Darius Cole was driving toward the same address, speaking into his earpiece. "Sir, I found Mrs. Bell's building. It is the same building where Keisha lives, but Grant's people reached the Monroe apartment first." Calvin's voice came back low. "Do not let them take anything." But inside the hallway, Marissa had already made her move. She snatched the medicine box from Nia's hands before Keisha could stop her. The pills spilled across the floor. Nia cried out. Keisha dropped to her knees, gathering the tablets one by one while the neighbors watched in helpless silence. The old napkin slid out beneath the box and opened against the dirty hallway tile. Marissa saw the faded handwriting. Her face went white. Then she made one mistake. She whispered, "Grant said this was destroyed." Keisha froze with a pill in her hand. Mrs. Bell heard it. Nia heard it. Even the guard heard it. Marissa reached down to grab the napkin, but a black car stopped outside the building, its headlights cutting through the stairwell window. A man's voice called from below. Step away from the girl. Step away from the girl. The voice came from the stairwell below, calm but firm enough to freeze everyone in the hallway. Marissa turned toward the window. The black car's headlights cut across the cracked wall, turning the old apartment building white for one sharp second. Darius Cole climbed the stairs in a dark coat, holding a phone in one hand and a small leather folder in the other. He did not look like hotel security. He did not look like police. That made Marissa nervous. "This is private property," she said quickly. Darius looked at the pills scattered across the floor, then at Nia, crying on the sofa bed, then at Keisha on her knees with one tablet in her palm. His voice lowered. "Private property does not give you the right to take a child's medicine." One of the guards stepped back. Marissa tried to recover. "She is withholding hotel evidence." Keisha stood slowly, keeping herself between Marissa and Nia. "That napkin is my mother's." "Your mother stole from the hotel, too?" Marissa snapped. The hallway went silent. Mrs. Bell gasped softly. Nia covered her mouth. Keisha looked as if the words had struck her in the chest, but she did not fall apart. She bent down, picked up the old napkin, and held it against her heart. "My mother fed people," she said. "That is not stealing." Darius opened the leather folder. "Then let us read what she wrote." Marissa reached for the napkin. Darius moved one step forward. "Not fast, not violent, just enough. Do not touch it again." Marissa's hand stopped in the air. Keisha unfolded the napkin with trembling fingers. The faded ink looked weak under the hallway bulb, but the words were still there. The old staff meal promise was real. WGH 001 was not charity. It was a debt. Darius took a photograph with his phone. Then he pulled out an old scanned kitchen ledger, the kind with yellowed lines and handwritten codes. He placed the image beside the napkin on his screen. Same phrase, same code, same blue ink. At the bottom of the ledger page was one sentence. "No hungry soul at our door. C.W." Senior the neighbors leaned closer. Marissa's face tightened. For the first time, the hallway was not laughing at Keisha. It was watching the hotel. Darius spoke into his earpiece. "Sir, the wording matches the archived ledger." A low voice answered through the device, too faint for everyone except Darius to hear clearly. But Keisha heard one word. "Lillian." Her breath caught. Darius looked at her differently then. With respect. With worry. "Miss Monroe," he said, "this is the first real proof that the program existed. It was not enough to clear her name. Not enough to get her job back. Not enough to punish Grant. But it was enough to prove Keisha had not invented a dead woman's promise. And if you're watching this moment, ask yourself why a wealthy hotel would be so desperate to erase one old meal program. What was Grant hiding in a promise made to hungry people? Marissa heard the shift in the room. She heard Mrs. Bell whisper, "That girl told the truth." So she changed the fight. "A napkin is not proof," she said. "A dead woman's handwriting is not legal evidence." Darius looked at her phone. "Then why did you say Grant thought it was destroyed?" Marissa froze. The guard beside her looked at her. Keisha looked at her. Even Nia stopped crying. Marissa swallowed. "I misspoke. No, Gesa Guisperth." "You knew." For one tiny second, hope entered the hallway again. Then Marissa lifted the sealed envelope. "This is now an internal theft investigation. If she refuses to cooperate, the hotel will file charges by morning." The neighbors stepped back. Legal words filled the hallway again like smoke. Darius could protect the napkin from being taken. He could protect the medicine box from being opened again. But he could not clear Keisha's name with one photograph and one archived phrase. Not yet. His phone buzzed. A new file arrived from Calvin. Darius opened it, and his face changed. It was a restored still from the service corridor camera. Blurry. Dark. 11 missing minutes were still gone, but one frame had survived before the cut. It showed Grant Pierce standing beside the kitchen archive cabinet tonight, holding Keisha's WGH 001 metal card in his bare hand. Darius turned the screen away before Marissa could see it. Marissa noticed. "What is that?" she demanded. Darius closed the folder. "Enough for us to keep looking." Keisha clutched the napkin and the medicine box. Nia whispered, "Are we safe now?" Before Keisha could answer, Darius received another call. He listened, then looked toward the stairwell window where the black car waited below. His voice became urgent. "Miss Monroe, the man who sent me says Grant knows where you live now. He says you and your sister cannot stay here tonight." Keisha stepped back. "Who sent you?" Darius glanced at the old napkin, then at the phone in his hand. "The blind man you fed. And he says the last person who protected this promise disappeared from the hotel records." "The blind man you fed," Darius said, "and he says the last person who protected this promise disappeared from the hotel records." Keisha held the napkin tighter. The hallway seemed to tilt around her. Nia looked from Keisha to Darius, then to the stairs where the black car waited below. "What does that mean?" Nia whispered. Darius did not answer quickly. That scared Keisha more than a lie would have. Marissa recovered first. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You are taking orders from a homeless man now." Darius turned to her. "I am taking orders from the only person in this building who has not touched a sick child's medicine." The words landed hard. One guard looked down at the pills still scattered near the door. Mrs. Bell bent slowly and helped Keisha gather them. One pill, then another, then another. It was a small mercy, but Keisha almost cried because no one from the hotel had offered her even that. "Thank you," Keisha whispered. Mrs. Bell put the last tablet into the box and squeezed her hand. "Your mother used to feed people on this block too," she said softly. Keisha looked up. "You knew her?" Mrs. Bell nodded once, then looked at Marissa and stopped speaking. Fear closed her mouth. Darius saw it. "Miss Monroe," he said, "you and your sister need to come with me." Keisha stepped back at once. "No." Darius lowered his voice. "Grant knows this address." "I know. He sent people here." "I know that too." "Then let me take you somewhere safe." Keisha shook her head. "Safe for whom?" "I followed hotel rules for 6 months. I worked through fever. I smiled at guests who threw towels on the floor and called me girl. Tonight, I fed one hungry man, and your hotel sent people to my apartment." Her voice broke, but she kept standing. "So no, I am not getting into a black car because another man says I should trust him." Darius did not argue. He looked at her like that answer made him respect her more. Then he held out the medicine box, not touching her hand until she reached for it. "Then take this first." Keisha took it. Nia watched, breathing fast. Darius pulled a small pharmacy receipt from his folder and placed it on the table beside the cracked lamp. "Your sister's next dose has already been paid for at the 24-hour pharmacy on Fulton Street." Keisha stared at the receipt. The amount was covered. Not everything. Not rent. Not her life. Just the medicine. A tiny rescue. One night of air. She looked at him with suspicion and shame fighting in her eyes. "I did not ask for charity." "It is not charity," Darius said. "It is harm reduction." That sounds like a rich way to say charity. A faint smile touched his face, then vanished. "Then call it a debt the hotel should have paid before it hurt you." Keisha looked toward the window. Down below, the black car sat silent under the streetlight. She could not see the blind man inside, but she felt his presence the way she had felt him in the corridor. Quiet, waiting, not pushing. Nia reached for her hand. "Keisha, please. I am tired." That was what broke her. Not Darius. Not the car. Not fear. Her sister's tired voice. Keisha helped Nia stand and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. Marissa stepped in front of the door. If she leaves, she is admitting guilt. Darius moved between them. Calm. Controlled. If you block a sick child from getting medicine, every neighbor in this hallway will remember it. The hallway changed. Mrs. Bell lifted her chin. Another neighbor raised his phone, but this time he pointed it at Marissa. Marissa saw the shift and stepped aside, furious. As Keisha guided Nia toward the stairs, Nia looked at Darius. Is the blind man really blind? The question was so innocent that even Marissa went still. Darius paused. He sees more than most people. Keisha frowned. What does that mean? Before Darius could answer, Mrs. Bell spoke from behind them, her voice trembling. Your mother said the same thing once. About a man named Whitmore. Keisha turned back slowly. Whitmore. Mrs. Bell's eyes filled with fear, as if the name had waited 20 years to hurt someone. Down below, the black car door opened. The blind man stepped out with his white cane, his face lifted toward the sound of Lillian Monroe's name returning through the stairwell. And for the first time, Keisha heard him whisper to himself, "Lillian, what did they do to your child?" The name Whitmore moved through the stairwell like a secret that had finally found air. Keisha stood halfway down the steps with Nia leaning against her side, the medicine box pressed her chest, and the old napkin folded inside her palm. Below them, the blind man stood beside the black car, his white cane touching the wet pavement. He had whispered, "Lillian, what did they do to your child?" But Keisha heard it. So did Mrs. Bell. So did Marissa. The hallway became so quiet that even Nia's weak breathing sounded loud. Keisha looked down at the man who had eaten her soup. "How do you know my mother?" Calvin did not answer at once. His face lifted toward her voice, but his hand tightened around the cane. "Some names are not forgotten," he said. "Some are buried by people who fear them." Marissa stepped forward quickly. "Do not listen to him. He is manipulating you." Mrs. Bell shook her head. "No, I remember now." Her voice trembled. "Lillian used to come home late from that hotel with bags of bread. She said the kitchen had a rule. No hungry soul at the door." Keisha turned to her. "Why did you never tell me?" Mrs. Bell looked ashamed. "Because after Lillian was fired, men from the hotel came asking questions. They told people she stole. They told us helping her would bring trouble." Nia whispered, "Grandma was not a thief." Calvin took one slow step toward the stairs. "No, she was not." Darius moved beside him, holding the phone with the old ledger still open. "Mrs. Bell, did Lillian ever mention WGH 001? The older woman closed her eyes. She called it the first promise. Said it came from the old Mr. Whitmore himself, before the hotel became all glass and gold. Calvin's mouth tightened, but he stayed controlled. Keisha noticed the pain on his face. It was not the curiosity of a stranger. It was grief. That frightened her more than Marissa's threats. Mrs. Bell reached into the pocket of her house dress and pulled out a tiny envelope, bent at the corners and yellow with age. "Lillian gave me this before she left the building that night," she said. "She told me to keep it if anything happened. I was too scared. I hid it for 20 years. Keisha could barely breathe. Mrs. Bell placed the envelope in her hand. Inside was a small photo, torn down one side. Lillian Monroe stood in a laundry uniform behind Whitmore Grand Hotel, younger, tired, but smiling. Beside her was a food cart with the WGH 001 mark painted on the handle. A man's hand rested on the cart beside hers, but his face had been torn away. On the back, in Lillian's handwriting, were 5 words. He said the promise lives. Keisha looked at Calvin. "Was this man you?" Calvin's jaw moved, but no answer came. Darius watched him carefully. Even he seemed to be waiting. Then Nia, weak and pale under the stairwell light, pointed at the torn edge of the photo. "There is a ring," she whispered. Everyone looked. On the man's hand was a dark signet ring with a silver W. Calvin's right hand moved instinctively toward his coat pocket, then stopped. Too late. Keisha saw it. Marissa saw it too. Her face went sharp with fear. She backed toward the hall and sent a text with one hand hidden behind her clipboard. Across town, Grant was still inside his office when the message arrived. "Mrs. Bell has photo. Ring visible. Blind man may be connected to Whitmore." Grant stared at the words. Then he opened his locked drawer and pulled out an old personnel file stamped Lillian Monroe. Inside was another copy of the same photo, but this one was not torn. The face beside Lillian was clear. Grant slammed it shut before anyone could enter. Back in the stairwell, Keisha held the torn photo like it was burning her fingers. "My mother died with people calling her a thief," she said. "And all this time, someone knew she was not." Calvin lowered his head. "I knew there was a wrong done. I did not know they buried her with it." Marissa suddenly raised her voice for the neighbors to hear. "This is exactly why Miss Monroe cannot leave. She has stolen hotel archives, hidden evidence, and now she is using a sick child to invent a conspiracy." Keisha turned on her. tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. "You are afraid of a dead woman." Marissa's phone buzzed. Grant's reply appeared. "Bring her back to the hotel. Tonight. Publicly. Before he controls the story." Marissa looked at the guards. "Take Miss Monroe to Whitmore, Grant. Mr. Pierce wants every donor to see what kind of liar she really is." Calvin's cane struck the pavement once. Grant is setting a trap. But Keisha was already staring at the photo, at the ring, at the missing face, and at the promise her mother had died defending. Grant Pierce did not wait for morning. He wanted the story buried before sunrise, before the blind man could open another file, before one torn photo became a knife pointed at his throat. So he turned the gala into a trap. Marissa brought Keisha through the service entrance like a criminal, with Nia beside her wrapped in a gray blanket and Darius walking 2 steps behind them, calm but watchful. The blind man stayed outside near the black car, his white cane in one hand, his head lowered as if listening to the hotel breathe. "Do not go in there alone," Darius told Keisha quietly. Keisha looked at Nia's tired face, then at the medicine box in her hands. "I have been alone since they fire my mother in people's mouths," she said. "Tonight, I just get to see who lies louder." Inside Whitmore Grand, the gala had not ended. The ballroom was still glowing. Donors still held champagne. Cameras still faced the stage where Grant's award waited under a velvet cloth. Humanity and hospitality. The words looked clean. The man beneath them was not. Grant stepped into the ballroom with a microphone before Keisha even crossed the threshold. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth and wounded, "I apologize for the interruption, but our hotel has been targeted tonight by a former employee attempting to exploit a charity event." Heads turned. Phones rose again. The same red lights. The same hungry eyes. Keisha stopped near the side aisle. Nia gripped her sleeve. Marissa moved fast, whispering to the guards, positioning Keisha where every donor could see her worn shoes, her torn uniform, and the medicine box in her arms. Grant pointed gently, like he was sad to do it. "Miss Monroe was dismissed for misusing hotel food. Now she has returned with stolen archive materials and a false story about her late mother." A low murmur ran through the ballroom. Evelyn Brooks stood near the front, her diamond earrings catching the light. She looked at Keisha, then at Grant, unsure. That small doubt gave Keisha one breath of hope. Grant killed it quickly. "Security found old hotel documents in her possession," he said, "and now a donation envelope is missing from the gala office." Keisha's blood went cold. Darius turned sharply. "Grant." Grant lifted a hand. "Search her bag." Keisha stepped back. "I have no donation envelope." Marissa reached for the torn cloth bag hanging from Keisha's shoulder. Keisha tried to hold it, but one guard blocked her. "Please," Nia said, her voice tiny. "My sister did not steal." No one listened to a sick child when a rich man had a microphone. Marissa pulled open the bag and took out the old napkin first, then the torn photo. Then, from a side pocket Keisha had not touched all night, she pulled a cream-colored envelope sealed with a gold sticker. Gasps moved through the ballroom. Keisha stared at it as if it were a snake. "That is not mine." Grant lowered his eyes with perfect sadness. "I wish I believed you." Darius reached for the envelope, but Grant stepped back. No one touches evidence except hotel security. The blind man had warned them. A trap. Now the trap had teeth. Grant turned to the donors. "This is why compassion must be protected from manipulation." Keisha's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. "You planted that." Marissa laughed softly. "Poor girl, rich imagination." Evelyn Brooks took one step forward. "Mr. Pierce, perhaps we should review the camera before making accusations." For a second, the room shifted. Tiny hope. Grant smiled. "Of course." Then he looked toward the tech table. "Play the service corridor footage." The screen behind him flickered. It showed Keisha carrying soup. It showed her bending near the blind man. Then the video jumped. 11 minutes gone. It resumed with Keisha standing near the archive hallway, alone. The ballroom murmured louder. Darius's jaw tightened. He knew the cut was wrong. The blind man knew it outside before anyone told him. Grant spread his hands. "The camera speaks for itself." "Que ça guisperth." "No." "Someone cut it." Grant walked closer with the microphone still in his hand. Then prove it. Keisha looked at the screen. The old napkin was gone from Marissa's hand. The torn photo was gone too. Grant had separated her from every piece of truth in front of 200 people. Nia began to cry. Keisha wrapped one arm around her sister and faced the room. "My mother was not a thief," she said. Her voice shook, but did not break. Grant leaned toward the microphone. Like mother, like daughter. That was when the ballroom doors opened behind him. Cold air rushed in. Every phone turned. The old blind man stood in the doorway with his white cane, Rain on his shoulders, and the restored camera file still hidden on Darius's phone behind him. Grant smiled, not knowing the last file had just arrived. Calvin stood in the ballroom doorway, while every phone turned toward him. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of his torn coat. His white cane touched the marble once, then rested. To the donors, he was still the blind beggar from the service entrance. To Grant, he was a problem that had walked into the wrong room. To Keisha, he was the man who had asked one question and made powerful people afraid. Grant kept smiling because the microphone was still in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, with a small laugh meant to calm the room. "As you can see, the same individual who encouraged Miss Monroe's misconduct has returned." Marissa moved beside the tech table, clutching the torn photo and the napkin like they were trash she meant to throw away. Nia stood beside Keisha, shaking under the gray blanket. Evelyn Brooks looked from Grant to Calvin, and this time her doubt did not disappear. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "why is a blind man being treated like a suspect at a charity gala for the blind?" The ballroom went still. Grant's smile tightened. "Because compassion without standards becomes chaos." Calvin lifted his face toward the stage. "And standards without truth become cruelty." The words were soft, but they reached the back of the room. A few guests lowered their phones. Keisha felt Nia's fingers tighten around her sleeve. Grant walked closer to Calvin, careful to stay in the light. "You have caused enough trouble tonight. This hotel has rules." Calvin tilted his head. "I heard that already. I am waiting to hear if it still has a conscience." A murmur moved through the donors. Grant turned away before anger could show. "Security, remove him." 2 guards stepped forward. Darius Cole entered behind Calvin before they could touch him. He held his phone in one hand and a sealed digital access device in the other. He did not raise his voice. "No one removes anyone until the archive review is complete." Grant laughed. "Archive review? You have no authority here." Darius looked at the screen behind the stage. "Then let the people funding this gala hear why 11 minutes are missing from the service corridor footage." The room changed. Even a string quartet stopped. Marissa whispered Grant. Grant shot her a warning look. "There is no archive review," he said. "There is only a fired worker, a stolen envelope, and a man pretending to be helpless." Calvin took one step forward. The guards hesitated without knowing why. "If I am pretending," he said, "then prove your kindness was real." Keisha looked at him. She still did not know who he was. She only knew he had not asked her to bow. He had not asked her to beg. He had only asked questions everyone else wanted buried. Grant pointed at Keisha. "This woman stole from a charity event." Keisha's voice came out quiet. "You planted that envelope." "Prove it," Grant said again. "You have no camera, no bike, no witness, no name worth protecting." That line hit the room like a slap. Nia stepped forward, weak but angry. "She has a name." Keisha pulled her back gently, but the damage was done. The donors saw the sick child. They saw the blanket. They saw the medicine box. They saw Grant's polished shoes beside Keisha's soup-stained ones. If you are still watching, this is the moment to decide what scares Grant more: the blind man at the door, the poor girl he tried to erase, or the camera footage he thought no one would ever restore. Darius moved to the tech table. Marissa blocked him. "This equipment belongs to the hotel." Evelyn Brooks stepped between them. "Tonight, this stage belongs to every donor whose name you used to raise money." Marissa froze. For the first time, Grant did not control every rich person in the room. A tiny hope opened. Grant crushed it fast. "Fine," he said. "Play whatever edited nonsense they brought. The truth will still show who she is." He walked back to the stage and stood beneath the award that read humanity and hospitality. It made him look taller. It also made him look trapped. Darius connected the device. The large screen flickered from the cut corridor video to a black archive page with an old seal. WGH-001. Staff meal promise. Restricted. Grant's face tightened. Marissa stepped back. Keisha saw the old code and stopped breathing. Calvin tapped his cane 3 times against the marble. Talp! 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 Before this room judges her, he said, it will hear what this hotel buried. The screen asked for final authorization. Darius looked toward Calvin, but Calvin did not speak yet. Grant suddenly shouted, "Turn it off!" And that panic told the ballroom more than his speeches ever had. "Turn it off!" Grant shouted, and the panic in his voice did what the screen had not done yet. It made the donors look at him instead of Keisha. Darius kept his hand on the digital access device. Evelyn Brooks stood beside the tech table and did not move. "No," she said. "Let it play." Grant pointed at her. "This is hotel property." Evelyn's eyes hardened. "This is charity money, and my name is on half of it." The ballroom fell into a silence so deep that the small click of Darius pressing authorization sounded like a door unlocking underground. The black archive page opened. WGH-001. Staff meal promise. Restricted by Grant Pierce. Then the first video filled the screen. It was not the cut footage Grant had shown. It was the backup angle from an old internal server. The room watched Keisha in the service corridor, tired and hungry, taking her own staff meal from the small employee tray. 1 bowl of soup, 1 piece of bread, no stolen platter, no guest food, no lie. The video showed her kneeling beside the blind man at the service entrance. It showed her giving him the bowl with both hands. It showed her saying, "Please eat before it gets cold." Keisha covered her mouth. Nia began to cry again, but this time it was not fear. Grant's face turned gray. Marissa stepped away from the napkin and torn photo as if they had become dangerous. Darius clicked again. The screen shifted. A second camera angle appeared from the hallway near the gala office. It showed Marissa opening Keisha's cloth bag while Keisha was not looking. It showed her sliding the cream-colored donation envelope into the side pocket. Gasps broke across the ballroom. Evelyn turned slowly toward Grant. "You accused her in front of my donors." Grant lifted the microphone, but no words came out. Keisha looked at the screen, then at the guests who had recorded her shame. Their phones were still up, but now they were recording the truth. Calvin stood near the center aisle, his white cane touching the marble. He had not moved during the footage. He had not smiled. He looked like a man listening to a grave open. Darius pressed the next file. The service corridor footage returned. The missing 11 minutes appeared, restored from the hotel backup. The room saw Grant enter the archive hall after Keisha had been dragged away. They saw him take the WGH-001 metal card from his pocket. They saw him place it inside a locked drawer. Then the screen zoomed on his hand as he typed a command into the system. Delete local footage. Restrict staff meal file. The ballroom erupted. "That is fake," Grant said, but his voice cracked. Calvin finally spoke. "No, that is habit." Grant turned on him. "Who are you to speak in my hotel?" Darius stepped forward and opened the final authorization page. Calvin lifted one hand, and the room went still again. "My name is Calvin Whitmore." A murmur moved like wind through the ballroom. Evelyn Brooks took one step back. Marissa dropped the torn photo. Calvin continued, calm and low. "I am the controlling owner of Whitmore Grand Hotel. I returned quietly because I was told this hotel had forgotten how to recognize a human being at its door." Grant's mouth opened, but nothing came. Calvin turned his face toward Keisha. "Tonight, Miss Monroe fed me when every rich person in this room walked past me." Keisha could not breathe. The blind beggar was not a beggar. The man she had fed with her last meal owned the floor beneath Grant's polished shoes. But Calvin did not let the shock become celebration. He pointed his cane toward the screen. "Play Lillian Monroe's file." Darius opened the old personnel record. A faded report appeared. "Terminated for food theft." Beneath it, another document appeared from the original archive. "Lillian Monroe, laundry staff. WGH-001 one volunteer. Protected service meals during emergency cuts. Then an old photograph filled the screen. Not torn, complete. Lillian stood beside the food cart, smiling beside Calvin's father, Charles Whitmore Sr., whose signet ring marked the promise. On the bottom of the page was his handwritten note. This program is a debt of dignity. No manager may cancel it. Keisha looked at her mother's face on the screen and broke down silently. Nia held her hand. Mrs. Bell, watching from Darius's live call on the side screen, whispered, "Lillian, they finally said your name right." Grant staggered back. Calvin turned toward him, his voice quiet enough to hurt. "You did not only fire a poor girl. You repeated the lie you used to bury her mother." Darius clicked one more folder. A financial transfer appeared. WGH 001 funds moved into gala branding. Authorized by Grant Pierce. Evelyn Brooks stared at the amount. The donors began whispering, angry now, ashamed now. Grant reached for the microphone again. "I can explain." Calvin tapped his cane once. "Good. Then explain it under oath." The ballroom froze as two board members entered from the side doors with legal counsel behind them. Grant looked at the screen, then at Keisha, then at the award above his head. Humanity and hospitality. And for the first time that night, he had nowhere left to hide. Grant looked at the board members as if they were strangers who had entered the wrong ballroom. Legal counsel stood behind them with a folder already open. Evelyn Brooks did not sit down. The donors did not clap. No music returned. No one rescued the man who had spent the night pretending to protect the hotel's reputation while burying its heart. Calvin stood in the center aisle with his white cane resting against the marble. His voice stayed low. "Mr. Pierce, you wanted witnesses. Now you have them." Grant straightened his jacket, but his hands betrayed him. They trembled near the microphone. "This is being taken out of context," he said. A donor near the front laughed once, bitter and cold. Evelyn stepped forward. "Which part? The planted envelope, the erased camera, the stolen meal fund, or the dead employee you blame for your theft?" Grant turned to her. "You do not understand hotel operations." Evelyn's face hardened. "I understand my money." That sentence struck harder than shouting. The ballroom shifted. The rich guests who had whispered about Keisha now whispered about contracts, fraud, and reputations. Grant felt power, leaving him one quiet person at a time. Calvin nodded to Darius. Another file appeared on the screen. This one was not emotional. It was numbers. Donations marked for the WGH 001 Promise Kitchen. Transfers into event branding. Luxury floral invoices. Private consulting fees. Grant Pierce. Marisa Valley. Approved. Reviewed. Hidden. Marissa backed away from the tech table. "I only followed instructions," she said quickly. Grant turned on her. "Be quiet." Calvin lifted one hand. "Let her speak." Marissa looked around the room and finally understood what Keisha had felt all night. Every face watching. Every phone recording. Every escape blocked by truth. "He told me the program was dead," she said. "He said the Monroe woman was a thief and her daughter would become a problem if anyone believed her." Keisha closed her eyes. Not because she was weak, because hearing her mother's name cleaned in public hurt almost as much as hearing it dragged through mud. Nia held the medicine box with both hands. "Say Grandma's name," she whispered. Her voice was small, but the ballroom heard it. Calvin turned toward the screen. "Lillian Monroe." He said it slowly. "Employee, mother, neighbor, keeper of a promise this hotel had no right to bury." Keisha's tears fell, but she did not hide them. Grant tried one final time. "You cannot remove me in front of guests. I built this brand." Calvin's face did not change. "You built fear in the staff corridors. You built silence in poor apartments. You built a stage to shame a woman whose only crime was feeding me." One board member stepped forward. Effective immediately, Grant Pierce is suspended pending formal investigation. His access to hotel systems, accounts, and staff records is revoked. Darius took the microphone from Grant's hand. Not roughly, not dramatically, just finally. The room watched Grant lose the weapon he had used all night. Words, authority, volume, gone. Security approached him, but Calvin raised his hand again. No spectacle. No cruelty. Walk him out like a man being held accountable. Not like the poor people he enjoyed humiliating. That was Calvin's justice. Not revenge. Not violence. Not a cheap victory. Dignity, even for the man who had denied it to others. Grant looked at Keisha as if expecting hatred. She gave him none. That confused him more than anger would have. You fired me for feeding a hungry man, she said. But you starved this hotel for years. Evelyn removed the donor badge from her dress and placed it on the table. My foundation is withdrawing support from the current management board until an independent audit is complete. Other donors followed. One badge, then another, then another. The sound was soft, but it buried Grant deeper than any shout. Marissa began crying near the stage. Calvin turned to her. You will give a full statement. Then you will face the consequences of every lie you helped carry. She nodded because there was nothing left to perform. Grant was led toward the side doors. The award above the stage still read humanity and hospitality. No one handed it to him. No one said his name. At the aisle, he passed Keisha, Nia, and a medicine box he had tried to use as pressure. Nia looked at him and said, My sister fed him because you would not. Grant had no answer. When the doors closed behind him, the ballroom did not cheer. It breathed. Calvin turned back to Keisha and held out the WGH-001 metal card, recovered from Grant's locked drawer. The old silver surface caught the light. This belongs to your family, he said. Keisha reached for it with shaking fingers. Before she could speak, Calvin looked at the board, the donors, and every camera in the room. Tonight is not finished, he said. Before this hotel asks forgiveness from the public, it will ask forgiveness from the woman standing right here. Calvin's words left the ballroom with no place to hide. Before this hotel asks forgiveness from the public, it will ask forgiveness from the woman standing right here. For the first time that night, no one looked at the stage. They looked at Keisha Monroe, the fired girl, the poor girl, the girl with soup on her shoes, tears on her face, and her mother's silver WGH-001 card trembling in her hand. Evelyn Brooks stepped forward first. She did not speak like a donor. She spoke like a woman who had watched shame change sides. Miss Monroe, she said, I believed the wrong man because he wore a title. I am sorry. One by one, others followed. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly enough to make the room feel human again. Keisha did not smile. Forgiveness was not a performance. Pain did not disappear because rich people finally felt embarrassed. She looked at the screen where Lillian Monroe's face still glowed beside the old food cart. Then she looked at Calvin. Do not just apologize to me, she said. Put her name back where they erased it. Calvin lowered his head. It will be done. 3 months later, the back entrance of Whitmore Grand Hotel no longer had a guard posted to chase hungry people away. It had a small brass sign beside the door. WGH-001 Promise Kitchen. No hungry soul at her door. Under the words was another line. Restored in honor of Lillian Monroe. Keisha stood in front of that sign on the first morning it opened. Her uniform was different now. Clean black blazer. Simple name badge. Keisha Monroe. Community Hospitality Coordinator. She was not made rich overnight. Calvin did not hand her a mansion or a fairy tale. He gave her something stronger. A chance to rebuild what had been stolen. A salary with dignity. Classes in hotel management. A voice in the room where decisions were made. Nia stood beside her, healthier, warmer, with color returning to her cheeks. Her dialysis was still part of life, but now it was not a terror waiting at every sunrise. The clinic bills were under review through the new staff emergency fund. Rent was paid. Food was in the refrigerator. And for the first time in years, Keisha slept without counting pills in the dark. Inside the lobby, Lillian's full photo hung in a glass frame. Not the torn one, the whole one. Beside it rested a replica of the WGH-001 card, polished but still old enough to remember pain. The real card stayed with Keisha, close to her keys, where her mother's promise belonged. Calvin stood near the wall, his white cane in hand, listening as workers walked past the display. Some stopped, some read, some cried quietly. They had all known what it felt like to be invisible in a beautiful building. Marissa Vale gave her statement and left the hotel industry under investigation. Grant Pierce faced auditors, lawyers, and the public record he had tried to bury. But Keisha did not spend her new life watching his fall. She spent it opening a door. That afternoon, a young boy in a soaked hoodie stood outside the service entrance, holding his little sister's hand. The guard looked at Keisha, waiting for the new rule. Keisha remembered the spilled soup, the phones, the laughter, the medicine box, the way one hungry man had been treated like trash until the truth walked back in wearing power. She opened the door herself. "Come in," she said. "Eat before it gets cold." The boy stepped inside, unsure if kindness had a cost. Keisha knelt to his level and placed a warm bowl in his hands. Across the lobby, Calvin heard her voice and smiled faintly. Not because everything was fixed. Some wounds do not vanish. Some names need years to be cleaned. But a promise had returned to the place that buried it, and Keisha had become the keeper of it. So remember this. Never call kindness weakness. Never judge the poor by their shoes, their job, or the door they enter through. A hungry person may be carrying a truth. A fired woman may be carrying dignity. And a small act of mercy, given when no one is watching, may be the very thing that brings a whole empire to its knees.